It is nearly 2 years since COVID-19 all of a sudden took a toll on the global world. And of course, it went on sweeping across the globe, taking lives that have since turned into statistics of what we all, dread to think about. In addition to it taking many lives, it also had devastating effects on Africa, especially people who come from very deprived families. But as an African diaspora, I can only attest that many of us bore a double burden, as if we are already not used to contributing so much to helping our families and doing a lot for the people down there. We also saw people, as well as diaspora organizations, engaging in soliciting all sorts of support that they could, and they went ahead to send this support back home, even at a time when the whole world seemed to have come to a standstill with very, very minimal movements. We still saw the diaspora as well as diaspora organizations doing a lot in the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first ADEPS Diaspora Impact on Africa's Development Month. Today's conference is only the beginning of a month-long series of activities, and we shall be deliberating on the post-COVID-19 recovery and the role of the diaspora, or rather, put it differently, the diaspora organizations play in the development of the continent, even beyond post-COVID-19 recovery. Before we get going, just a few technical aspects to note here. To all the participants, we have the chat rooms that are opened, and you are free to engage in a conversation, for instance, sending your questions that you would like us to address later on in the course of this conference. You can send that in the chat rooms, and I will be reading out the questions at a later stage or as and when they come in. Africa, of course, is a continent full of diversity. Similarly, ADEPT also recognizes that, and in that note, we take into consideration that there might be people who are not well versed in English or who prefer to listen to today's conference in another language. If you look down on your screen, you will see a symbol of the globe. And if you click in there, you have the opportunity to choose between English and French, because we are also providing translation. I will personally be moderating in English, but we also have translation in French. And when we have French speakers, we will of course have translation in English. So just click on your chat on the globe symbol there and choose the language that you want to participate or listen to the conference proceedings as we continue. Assuming that we've now got into all that, once again, my name is Jane Ayeko Kumet. I'll be your moderator today, and I'm based in Germany, of course, as a found member or lover of ADEPT. And now that we've understood those technical aspects, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome ADEPT's current president, Alexis Neuberg, to give us his opening remarks. Alexis, the virtual floor is yours.
Merci, thank you very much, Jen. Bonjour, mesdames, mesdemoiselles et messieurs, chers panélistes, chers invités, bonjour. Selon le lieu où vous vous trouvez, au bonsoir ou au bonjour. Mes salutations les plus profondes et fraternelles sont adressées spécialement à Madame Epsi Campbell, la vice-présidente de la République Costa Rica. Mes salutations aussi vont à Madame Jutta Oplaina, la commissaire de l'Union européenne pour le partenariat international. Je dis bonjour à tout le monde, en rappelant brièvement, vite, que, comme je le disais aujourd'hui, c'est notre jour. ADEPT existe maintenant depuis bien lancé par une équipe de construction pendant 6 ans comme un projet. L'objectif de ce projet, c'était la mise en place d'une organisation indépendante que ADEPT. Et je saisis cette occasion pour saluer la bravoure d'abord de Awil et de Jibril, qui ont été les pionniers à la tête de cette création de cet aspect. Et depuis 4 ans, nous sommes installés ici à Bruxelles pour nous occuper du renforcement des capacités pour booster l'engagement de la diaspora africaine engagée dans le développement en Afrique, mais aussi assurer le plaisir qu'on puisse promouvoir un climat politique et financier favorable à cet engagement. À la Commission européenne, à la coopération suisse pour le développement, le premier moment et qui nous soutiennent dans ce chemin. La contribution de la diaspora au pays d'origine, même d'accueil, spécialement de fonds, plus de dollars en 2020, marquant COVID-19, l'importance du chiffre peut faire oublier les autres questions notamment le transfert des compétences, notamment le renforcement des capacités, réseaux et partenariats, investissements et entrepreneuriat et autres projets de développement local mis en œuvre par les organisations de la diaspora africaine. Au nombre de plusieurs dizaines de milliers d'acteurs allant dans les associations individuelles et informelles aux ONG connues, les organisations de développement de la diaspora africaine, que nous appelons souvent les ADOS, basées en Europe, contribuent à l'agenda 2030 et leurs activités vont de secours aux projets de développement. Cependant, leur impact reste invisible, méconnu, sous-estimé et dispersé. Les ADOS opèrent en dehors du cercle traditionnel du développement qui leur est fermé, bien qu'elles contribuent également au développement de l'Afrique. La plateforme Afrique-Europe Development Diaspora Development Platform que nous avons justement créée a été créée dans ce contexte d'amplifier la voix, l'impact de la diaspora engagée dans le développement en Afrique. Maintenant, nous sommes réunis pour célébrer un facteur très important, l'union, le partenariat. Mais avant de développer ce point de partenariat, je voudrais d'abord saluer la présence encore de Mme Epsi Campbell, de la vice-présidente de la République Costa Rica entre nous. Grâce à l'initiative de son pays, les Nations Unies ont voté une résolution qui consacre le 31 août de chaque année comme les Afro africains, la justice. La dette a eu l'honneur d'être et maintenant, Mme Campbell, elle est également parmi nous. Nous espérons continuer ce partenariat comme un modèle de partenariat international, même l'année prochaine, et continuer à joindre nos efforts pour l'implémentation pratique de cette résolution. En plus, nous allons aussi aujourd'hui écouter avec attention le message de Mme Jutta Urpilainen, la commissaire européenne. Elle va, bien sûr, je l'espère, renforcer l'utilité d'un partenariat international. Il faut un partenariat solide, mesdames, mesdemoiselles, messieurs. Il faut un partenariat solide de tous les acteurs de développement pour exploiter ou amplifier les potentialités qu'offre l'engagement de la diaspora africaine, qui se distingue par le rapprochement des bénéficiaires, son engagement et détermination, ses connaissances intellectuelles et ses connaissances de terrain. L'objectif de ce mois d'impact de la diaspora pour le développement de l'Afrique, DIAD, et donc montrer l'impact en Afrique des organisations de la diaspora basée en Europe. Nous aurons l'occasion d'analyser les défis du partenariat entre les diasporas africaines et les acteurs de la coopération du développement. En outre, des solutions possibles seront discutées et présentées. Il est notamment question de partenariat nécessaire pour que l'impact de l'engagement au développement de l'Afrique soit efficace pour les populations locales et de la manière de relever les défis. Ce moment d'impact de l'engagement de la diaspora pour le développement est en fait un espace de dialogue. C'est pour cela que nous avons tenu à rassembler tous les acteurs qui sont autour d'ADIAD pour promouvoir l'union des forces. Deuxième moment, c'est une occasion de rendre visible et valoriser cet impact. C'est notre programme pilote, mesdames et messieurs, c'est notre programme pilote. Au cours de ce mois, beaucoup d'événements sont planifiés, aussi bien par nos équipes ici à Bruxelles que par les différents acteurs dans le développement, dans les pays européens. Vous pourrez les consulter sur notre site qui sera mis à jour régulièrement. Enfin, pour finir, j'en profite pour féliciter notre équipe ici à Bruxelles, ainsi que tous ceux ou celles qui, de près ou de loin, ont contribué et continuent à contribuer à la réussite de ce mois. Nous sommes sûrs que nous tirerons une leçon tout au long du acte pour le développement et en fait que l'année prochaine, notre deuxième édition soit encore plus performante. Nous attendons de nous tous une bonne contribution. Souhaitons-nous tous bonne chance. Et moi, je dis aussi bonne chance à tout le monde qui, dans le même secteur, nous soutiennent. Et merci beaucoup. Et maintenant, je pense que Jen, le mois d'impact est lancé.
Thank you very much, President Novak. Thank you indeed. Perhaps something that I could have forgotten to inform the participants is that in order for you to access the translation, you need to use your microphones so that you plug in and then you're able to choose what language you would like to continue. Mr. Novak, thank you very much for your insights. Thank you indeed. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if there is one thing that we've learned during this COVID-19 pandemic, it's that we have gotten to perhaps finally appreciate even more the value of the worldwide webs and the internet platforms that are available for us. We have finally learned that we do not have to wait for the possibility to be physically present and interact with one another in order to forge partnerships, to talk about development or any issues that concern us. What COVID-19 has taught us is that we are able to connect virtually, even as we are doing right now. At this point, I would have been welcoming Madame Jutta Uplin, who is the European Commissioner for International Partnerships, but she is unable to join us today. But nevertheless, thanks to the internet platforms, we are able to join her, or rather she's able to join us through a pre-recorded video message. We now take a listen to what she has to say for us in this very precious occasion.
The voice.
Dear friends, I am delighted to contribute to the launch of the Diaspora Impact for Africa's Development Month. Your theme, partnerships, could not be more relevant. Over the past year and a half, the pandemic has illustrated just how interconnected the world is. Today, the key to building a fairer, greener, and more sustainable world is international partnerships. And let me be clear, the diaspora plays a crucial role. Diaspora members contribute to the development of both their host and home countries. They make investments, create businesses, foster trade, and provide a vital cultural bridge. The EU has formally recognized this role in numerous policies. Through the EU Global Diaspora Facility, we want to facilitate cooperation between home countries and diaspora members on all continents. Your voices must be heard, and that is why we have made diaspora development organizations part of our policy forum on development. This platform ensures that your insights inform the EU's political and decision-making processes and help the EU enhance future cooperation and policy development. As part of this, we have successfully partnered with the African diaspora for a long time, including through organizations such as ADAPT. The upcoming months are important as we prepare for the AU-EU summit to redefine the new partnership between the EU and Africa, based on the strategy we have presented in March 2020 and on the consultations we have launched since then. I had the pleasure of meeting some of you in Brussels and in Paris a few weeks ago. I look forward to continued conversation with African diaspora members to explore how we can advance sustainable development as part of this partnership. Together, we can collectively address the greatest priorities of our time.
We do thank very much Madam Jutta Uplainen for her insights, even if it was only a virtual recording. Certainly the message is in there, and I suppose you all heard it for yourselves that the diaspora is Africa's very, very valuable asset. And I personally think that ADAPT has positioned itself very well to advance this cause even further. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we shall now move from one union to another. We heard from the European Union representative in there, and now we shall go to African Union representative, and we have our very own Angela Odai, who is the acting head of Diaspora Division at the Directorate of Citizens and Diaspora Organizations, CIDO, of the African Union. Angela, we know each other very well, and I have the honor to welcome you to talk to us about African diaspora as the sixth region of the continent. I was very, very delighted when the African Union certainly did recognize us as its sixth region. So the floor is yours, Angela.
Thank you very much, Jane. Good afternoon, all. Her Excellency F.C. Campbell, Vice President of Costa Rica, Representative of the EU, Mrs. Oblinen, Professor Jibril Fall, Dr. Awil Mahmoud, the Africa-Europe Diaspora Development Platform, ADAPT, representatives of various diaspora groups, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the African Union Commission, please allow me to welcome you all to this very important launch of a month-long exhibition that highlights the contributions of diaspora, named Diaspora Impact on African Development. We are working under the theme Partnership for Development. And this has been proven in so many ways, just as the previous speakers have mentioned during the pandemic, that working in silos hamper development. And it is only in togetherness that we get to build strength on the various objectives that we seek to achieve. The African Union Commission commends the Africa-Europe Diaspora Development Platform, the recognized diaspora network in Europe, which acts as the umbrella body for all our diaspora networks, for your remarkable commitment over the years in initiating several development-based diaspora projects to impact and then to shape both Africa and Europe. Prominent among what you've been doing is the setting up of strategic platforms for dialogue, which highlights matters of interest to the diaspora, their welfare, as well as how best the union and its member states can leverage on some of the initiatives, the wonderful initiatives for the overall development of their countries and subsequently the continent. Africa as a continent has been blessed undoubtedly with the widest variety of diaspora, which reflects and depicts the various eras of our history, ranging from the over 200 million African people who live in the Americas to the descendants of Africans enslaved towards the Mediterranean Sea during the Ottoman Empire, who affirm their identity as Afro-Turks and Afro-Indians, and who have their origins from East Africa. This rich identity, culture, and heritage that the diaspora exude in their philanthropic contributions, skills, and connections shows the beauty of the African diversity, which we all agree that it must be harnessed in a proactive manner towards the continent's social, economic, and overall development. Trends and data have highlighted that approximately 19 million African migrants who live outside of the continent based on the World Migration Report by the IOM. Now, albeit these huge figures in our global representation cannot be ignored. And in order to build and institutionalize more effective collaboration with the African diaspora, the African Union held its first and only Global African Diaspora Summit in 2012, whereby we saw heads of state and government adding up a portfolio and then mapping up certain things they will want to see as a line of action and then a strategy in us to be able to harness our diaspora towards the continent's development. The AU's commitment to the inclusion of the diaspora is very much reflected in our Constitutive Act, which has invited and it still encourages the full participation or inclusiveness of the African diaspora as an important part of our continent. The Citizens and Diaspora Organizations Directorate, CIDO, was established to serve as a catalyst to facilitate the involvement of Africans on the continent and the diaspora in the affairs of the African Union. Its commitment is to ensure that the AU represents not only elements of African governments, but also reflects African communities, namely civil society and African diaspora in the development and support of our AU activities, decision-making processes, programs, institutions, organs, and overall goals. As part of our mandate, CIDO serves as the AU's official liaison office for CSOs from and outside of the continent to interact with the African Union Commission, and it is strategically placed under the Bureau of the Deputy Chairperson. While we've all noticed that there's a momentum at a continental, regional, and national level for diaspora engagement among states, regional economic communities, and the continent, there still remain several structural challenges relating to the capacity of AU member states to develop sound policy frameworks that can generate developing impact from diaspora engagement. AU member states are currently at different levels of evolution in terms of diaspora engagement, which is promising because it is a process. And we are happy to announce that most of them are still willing to actually work with CIDO for us to have sustainable diaspora development projects going on. Now, on the other hand, the Commission as well ensures that diaspora networks are established, strengthened, and then engaged through various collaborations, such as such a platform that support developmental initiatives in African Union member states. working together with ADEPT and working together with Europe as a continent and Africa as a continent, and seeing how best we could bring together strong minds such as policymakers, think tanks, African citizens, and other diaspora to be able to actually discuss or have dialogue on most of the pertinent issues that trouble or are thorny so far as the continent is concerned. It is my utmost pleasure to address you all and then to reaffirm the support of the African Union Commission to its diaspora and to the developmental initiatives you bring to the fore in the building of the Africa that we all want. With such a partnership, I deem it priceless. And I wish us all fruitful deliberations. Thank you so much.
It is encouraging and motivating to know how African Union positions the diaspora and how much it values its diaspora. Above all, to acknowledge and to know that African Union does recognize the contribution that its diaspora makes to the continent. Thank you very much, Angela. Thank you indeed. Now, let's understand the importance of this partnership, because as I started from the beginning, we are talking about partnerships with the diaspora, with the different development partners. Let's understand how important this partnership is to leverage diaspora impact in Africa, what can be done to accelerate this compliance, especially in line with the International Decade for People of African Descent and their commitment to Africa's development. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now privileged to have the Vice President of Costa Rica, Madame Epsi Campbell-Barr, to talk to us about these issues. Madame Vice President is the first Afro-descent woman to hold such a very senior position in the Caribbean or in the Americas. She has held very senior political positions, including having been a Minister for Foreign Affairs. I must also note and emphasize that her interests extend beyond politics to being a human rights activist on issues such as women, indigenous people, and Afro descents, among others. Quite a wide and large, elaborate CV. In 2019, she was rated by the Forbes magazine as one of the most powerful and influential women of Latin America and the Caribbean. At the mention of the word powerful and influential, I rest my case. The CV is just so marvelous. And ladies and gentlemen, join me, even virtually, to welcome Madam Vice President. And Madam Vice President, the virtual floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Jane. Mr. Alex Neuberg, President of the Africa-Europe Diaspora Development, Mrs. Angela Odai, African Union Commission. It is an honor for me to participate at the opening ceremony of the Diaspora Impact on Africa Development Month, organized by the Africa-Europe Diaspora Development Platform, a wonderful network that seeks to amplify the influence and the impact of African diaspora individuals and development organizations in Africa and Europe. It is also an honor to speak as an Afro-descendant vice president, the first from Latin America, in a space where we continue to build bridge between the African diaspora and also with the African continent. Thank you very much, Alexis, for inviting me. We have to continue doing our job for the justice and development recognition as promised by the Decade for People of African Descent. Despite the enormous contribution of people of African descent to politics, culture, gastronomy, science, and dozens of other areas, their impact remains invisible, unrecognized, underestimated, and dispersed, which is why we are here today to call for equality. Today's event is part of the International Decade for People of African Descent under the slogan, Recognition, justice, and development. The decade provides an operational framework to encourage states to eradicate the social injustices inherited from history, as well as to combat racism and racial discrimination still suffered by people of African descent. The declaration of this decade aimed to promote the respect, protection, and realization of human rights of people of African descent, greater recognition of their diversity and cultural heritage, and the adoption of strengthening of national, regional, and international legal frameworks in accordance with the Durban Declaration and the International Convention of elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. With little time left before the end of the decade, although we have made progress on some of these objectives, there are still great tasks pending to guarantee the effective application of these international legal instruments and, above all, to guarantee the same rights or equal terms to all people of African descent throughout the world. This means that a model of non-inclusion development, structural racism, and culture of privilege that continues to reproduce inequality, deprivations, and violation of rights to impact the people of African descent, particularly women and girls, on a daily basis still persist. In this sense, African descendant population continue to suffer much more severely from poverty and extreme poverty, lack of basic services, lack of access to education, quality health and social protection, especially in this time of pandemic of COVID-19. Not to mention, they are also more prone unemployment, underrepresentation in decision-making space, and suffer from various forms of violence. For example, at this moment, people of African descent are experiencing an surge in racial violence around the world, particularly in Latin America, in the United States, and also in Europe, where we saw the death of US citizen George Floyd, who was brutally murdered by police forces. But George Floyd is not only one. There's 100 of George Floyd all over the world. Systemic violence is also suffered by Afro-descendant youth, which has been called a genocide by the Brazilian Supreme Court, where hundreds of Black young under the age of 20 die to the exclusion when they are captured by mafia network, drug addiction, or the police. For these young people of African descent, we must ensure that today youth have every opportunity and every right now and in the future. In addition to identification of the racial violence and systemic violation of human rights suffered by people of African descent, the pandemic caused by COVID-19 has highlighted the inequalities we face as a population, since in most cases there has been an absence of health policy for our sector of our people. Therefore, we must promote mechanisms to accelerate fulfill of the rights of people of African descent that disproportionately suffer the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic. Recently, we have also seen with enormous concern the differentiated impact of climate change in Afro-descendant community and Africa's and African countries without having policies or instruments that consider these vulnerabilities and exclude from the mitigation, adaptation, resilience, and finances strategy of this international regime to address this phenomenon. Now we are in this exactly time. We are in the COP26, discuss these issues and meet and see which is the different impact in Caribbean countries and also in African countries and in poverty countries. The situation of African descendant women is even worse, seen due to structural and historical gender inequalities that characterize our society. They have been placed in a situation of subordination and discrimination, still in the group of those who have little or no access to health, education, housing, land, and credit. Added to this racial disadvantage, it is the fact that women face the burden of domestic and care work, a structural factor of gender inequality that significantly restricts our ability to have our own resources, access to social security, or participate in the same way as men in decision-making spaces. Despite this adverse condition, women of African descent have had the strength and resilience of our ancestors who were able to overcome enormous obstacles by taking extraordinary steps in favor of justice and rights of our people. That is, we have been able to turn history into freedom and pain into hope. In this sense, as the first Black woman vice president, I have assumed with responsibility and international leadership so that the agenda of rights of people of African descent, and particularly women and girls, are priority in decision of multilateral organization and government in this region, in Latin America and the Caribbean. That is why, as part of this commitment, the government of Costa Rica, with the support of the Republic of Chad, promote at the United Nations General Assembly a resolution to proclaim August 21st as the International Day of People of African Descent, but also the Forum for African People of African Descent. That is a very big gain of our people in all over the world. Within this recognition, we held to be the first time in Costa Rica, we seek to promote respect for human rights, fundamental freedoms, contribute to the elimination of all forms of discrimination against people of African descent, and to promote the diverse heritage and extraordinary contribution of the African diaspora. The establishment of permanent forum of people of African descent to seek political, economic, and social inclusion of all people of African descent, in addition to providing expert and advice and recommendation to Human Rights Council and other United Nations agencies dealing with the challenge of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and intolerance. We have the opportunity to build together from public and governmental spaces, but fundamentally from the space promoted by the civil society. That's why I want to congratulate you with this very important space. Inclusive spaces for our people to not leave anybody behind. And in this sense that I would like to acknowledge the work of Africa-Europe Diaspora Development Platform in consolidating these synergies. Finally, I would like to call upon you the new and leadership commitment to work for all those people of African descent who still do not have a voice or are not heard. I invite you to unite, to pave the way and not to lose heart in this struggle. Today, more than ever, we must work to leave no one behind. Thank you very much.
I think she deserves an applause, even if it's a vacuum applause. Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. Thank you indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, if I try to paraphrase or even to say something that she said, I will be diluting her speech. I think you heard it all. Nobody could have put it rightly just as she did it. Thank you, Madam Vice President. Thank you very much. And I do hope that you still have some time to continue in the deliberations with us. Now, ADEPT's current president, Norbert, already mentioned Mr. Gabriel Fall was a very instrumental person at the formation of ADEPT, and indeed he steered the platform to maturity. I must say that I consider him as a Democrat, very exemplary of many African leaders, so to say, because he handed its management over to a very competent team that has been able to bring us here today, even if it's only virtually. He will now talk to us about advocacy for partnering with diaspora. Mr. Fall, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Jane. Your Excellency, Vice President, thank you so much for that inspirational speech. Thank you to the AU Commissioner, the African Union representative, and ADEPT President. I'm going to make three short remarks on three topics. One, the principle of advocacy. Second, the practice of advocacy. And third, what should the partners in advocacy be doing, in my view? The principle for institutions to partner with diaspora, African and otherwise, in my view, is a settled matter. And that is reflected in bilateral, regional, and international agreements over the past 2 decades. With the EU and Africa, they started substantively perhaps from 2006 with the Joint Africa Strategic Partnership, and that has gone through several phases of renewal. And it is in that framework that the support and partnership and even creation of ADEPT as a platform had come from that main framework. And today, as we speak, the global framework that manages or guides migration and development is in fact the Global Compact on Migration, and the principle of partnership with diaspora organizations is very well represented there. So I think it's a settled matter, and we should spend as little time on it as possible. Even when new bureaucrats come in and raise the questions of why do we partner, the burden should be on them to learn the rules and the framework, rather than the diaspora having to repeat to make a settled case. But we may want to refer to constant new forms of evidence that substantiate the validity of partnership for development. In the current pandemic period, the overwhelming evidence has been the resilience of diaspora contributions to development, with not only the increase in remittances during times of much difficulty for the diaspora, but we also saw a surge in collective remittances. Collective remittances have always been the Cinderella, the poor sister to remittances, but we saw with the COVID-19 pandemic an increase in collective remittances where members of the diaspora are supporting communities that they are not related with, they are not friends or family. We also saw in many countries diaspora leading feeding program, food packages, provision of sanitizers and provision of protective equipment, PPEs. In my own country of the Gambia, it was a diaspora organization that sent the largest consignment of face masks to the country. An organization called the Ida Bass Kidney Foundation, based in the UK, sent a consignment of 1.6 million face masks to the population, to the Gambia, which was by far, by several factors, by far the biggest of any support from China, from World Health Organization or other institutions. I often remind people as to which definitional framework I prefer when we talk of partnership. And the one I prefer is not from the world of development or the world of NGOs, it's from the world of commercial marketing. Because for them, partnership and the framework in which it sits, it's an existential matter. If they fail on it, they cease to exist as a business. So their framework, to me, is a powerful one. And just to remind you, they say in marketing that partnerships is the highest form of client loyalty. So for them, they see the relationship between products, entities, and people on different layers, different ranks, different rungs of loyalty, starting with the lowest one to the highest being partnership. And the lowest one is suspicion. Second after that is prospection. Third after that is customer relations. Then the fourth is client relationship. And finally, you have partnership. So partnership is not easy to achieve. It is the highest rank. So when we deal with institutions, we need to do a quick assessment to check where are we today in our relation to that other entity or organization. And from that, we map out a scheme or a program on how to move towards the ranks or the rungs up to the level of partnership. That being the overall framework, I would now want to make my personal observations as to what I think institutions should be doing to enhance partnership with diaspora organizations. And then I would also mention the ones that I think the diaspora themselves should do. For institutions, if they are not sure, and very often they may not be sure of how to treat the diaspora organizations, my advice is think of your best performing international NGOs or international organizations, your best performing IOs or INGOs that you partner with, and look at the diaspora organization within that lens. And if you are not sure, I can bet my money that if you do the research, you would find that the diaspora organizations are likely to have the same, if not a higher level of productivity and impact, because the overwhelming evidence, that's what it shows. So if you're not sure, you don't have to start a big assessment or research by yourself. Your default position should be, these are brilliant partners, potentially brilliant partners, and find the evidence to support it. Second is that default position means necessarily that diaspora organizations should be seen as substantive, deep partners rather than superficial and cosmetic, which also is very tempting to then do your whole programs and then as an afterthought, find a diaspora organization to be there. That is tokenism, and it is bad for all the reasons we know. So the default position should be one of deep and substantive partnership, unless you have overwhelming reason to show that you cannot do it. But the default position is go for the substantive partnership. Third relates to financing, appropriate financing of diaspora organizations. Of all the forms of partnerships that exist, it is very difficult to use one formula to fit everybody, but it is justified to look within the rules, just as one differentiates between small organizations and big organizations, between new organizations and long-term partners, the diaspora should also be looked in that view so that appropriate financing mechanism can be found. Otherwise, the exclusion will remain. And forever one would say, oh, it's because they cannot fit this criteria. Well, the assumption and the argument is the criteria are themselves excluding these organizations. So appropriate financing and long-term partnership financing is important. And along the same lines is also to find appropriate bureaucratic flexibility to reference and to improve the relationship with the different types of diaspora organizations. And finally, that would help the institutions have a diverse range of partners rather than insist on what is more convenient. That is to have one major diaspora organization and say, this is my organization. The diaspora is diverse, the interests are diverse, and there is developmental reasons why there should be a diversity in partnership. Just as institutions do not insist and say we only work with one UN body or one international NGO. Similarly, it should try, despite the convenience of seeking singular relationship, it is good to look for multiple plural relationships. And finally, Jen, my observations on what I think the diaspora on their part should be doing to advance good and genuine partnerships. First is that the world of international development, for all the virtues and vices that goes with it, works within programs and projects. That is the formula in which it works. So diaspora organizations need to be able to work within that framework because it is a big ask to not only ask for appropriate flexibility, but to ask for the redefinition of the framework that is unlikely to be achieved. So diaspora organizations need to be able to operate effectively within the development frameworks of programs and projects. And when they are in those frameworks, their biggest bargaining chip, in my view, is operational effectiveness and efficiency. That is to prove what is proven informally, that on average, they are more productive and more efficient and bring more leverage than other types of development organizations. That needs to be proven within the frameworks of standardized programming of partner organizations. It's quite difficult to do because it required a high level of operational discipline. But in my view, that is the biggest and most important thing that diaspora organizations need to learn and master. Third is to consolidate and scale up rather than find themselves into a world of stop and start. And there is a history of diaspora organizations in stop and start situations. One needs to move away from that through consolidation, scaling up towards institution building. And institution building does not happen through stop and start, irrespective of how brilliant those things that are started are. It is built on continuity and longevity and improving. So that consolidation is an important lesson for diaspora organizations to learn. Fourth is to, in that institution building and scaling up, to constantly implement and deliver the value added, what in this program is referred to as impact, to deliver on development impacts in such a visible way that the story sort of speaks for itself, that links to the operational effectiveness. And in many cases, that evidence on the ground is far more eloquent than discussions one may have to make a case for advocacy for the diaspora. Let the acts, let the impacts speak for themselves. Fifth point is need for strong relationships, both on the ground in Africa and globally through the global networks. The work that the diaspora organizations do, although some of the work relates to the diaspora where they are living, countries of residence, but overwhelmingly in this discourse is about their contribution to development in the continent. So it is obvious that one must see significant presence on the ground or strong partnerships on the ground. The organization, the diaspora organization need not be physically present, but then it needs to have very strong and visible partnerships. And linked to that point is the point that the Her Excellency the Vice President makes, that is the African diaspora in particular is a global diaspora. The African Union's definition of the African diaspora is multi-generational. So many of the organizations within ADEPT and within Europe are fourth generation diaspora organizations. Well, there is a particular developmental advantage in the fourth generation, but it is very important that the multi-generational aspect, both in terms of the children, second and third generation, but the older African American and the Africans in Latin America should also be connected. And I think the goal that we have as enshrined in the Sustainable Development Goals would be achieved faster and with greater result if we are able to improve on the mechanics of partnership with both institutions having to do more work and us, the diaspora organizations, also having to improve. Thank you so much for the kind invitation, and I look forward to the further discussions. Over to you, Jen.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. As usual, very insightful words there. I personally think it's not only food for thought, but food for action. I think the diaspora organizations that are present in this conference today have certainly picked a lot to take home there, and have picked, if they haven't already been doing, a starting point on the way forward in as far as building partnerships globally is concerned. Now, next on the agenda is a roundtable discussion. I already indicated that you're welcome to submit your questions in the chat room. If we have enough time, we shall be able to discuss your questions. So to answer your questions with some of the very competent team that the organizers have put together. Yeah, we are talking about post-COVID-19, we are talking about development in Africa, but of course, all these, we are talking about the role of the African diaspora in the development of the continent, but also looking at how much can we do, how far can we go, what mechanisms are we going to be looking at in as far as forging partnerships are concerned, something that Professor Fall Gabriel has already hinted onto. And like I said, the organizers have put together a very competent team to discuss some of these questions. What has already been done, what can we do, and what's the way forward? With me is going to be Amadou Francois Guy. I hope he's already been able to join. I hadn't seen him by the time we started off, but I hope that he's now been able to join us. Amadou Guy, if he's there, is the Director General of the Senegalese Abroad Association, I suppose, based in France. He has worked as a commercial advisor in as far as international banking services is concerned at La Banque Postale. Yes, I think that's the right way to say it. He's also been a program manager at the University of Texas at Houston Health Science Center. He has quite a rich CV, but it's also important to note that he's been collaborating with ADEPT on several occasions and over a long period of time. Mr. Amadou, you're also welcome to the team. I will also be joined by Dr. Awil Mohammed, my good old friend at the neighborhood here in Netherlands. He is the Director of African Diaspora Policy Center based in The Hague. He is, I like to call him as an academic as well, because his organization is actually a think tank, and he devotes a lot of his work on issues related with migration and development. He's also been working as a consultant and advisor for the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, everything basically around policy, migration, development, and Africa, of course. Mr. Awal, you are very welcome, and I look forward to your very bright and intelligent contributions in this discussion. We will also be joined by Odeli Robert, who is currently the Deputy Head of the Global Migration and Development at the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation based in Bern. She is or has been working at the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs for over 10 years. Very experienced person there, of course, women power there. And she has also been part and parcel of ADEPT and whatever ADEPT has been doing. She's also very knowledgeable there, and I look to her contribution. It's going to be quite an enlightening one. In addition to that, more women power in the team is Madame Urli. I suppose I pronounced the name very well, Urli Segro. You correct me if I don't get the name right there. And she serves as the Senior Project Manager of the European Union Global Diaspora Facility, which is a pilot project funded by the European Union's Directorate General for International Partnerships. Now, also a very competent person there. I'm not going to go into details of their bio, but this is going to be your assignment to read further, and because you want to know and engage a little bit more with such very competent people. We shall also be having on board more women power, Julian Valgren, who is the current acting director of ANAR, an organization that certainly deals with social justice in Europe. I read through the organization and I was quite impressed. I'm really looking forward to your contribution in there, Julian, as well. We will also have Brice Monu, one of the persons that I like to look at when she smiles. She's a consultant and expert on migration and development. She is based in France, and she's been working on different missions with the United Nations, as well as different development agencies when it comes to issues of migration, multi-stakeholder advocacy, and so on and so forth. Important to note is that she is also a board member of Forum, which is a platform of about 1,000 associations of people with migrant backgrounds. Quite interesting women power there. We will be discussing with them. And of course, not last but not least, our own Angela. We already heard about her. Angela is not only representing the African Union here, but she is also going to be a discussant in our panel. So you can get your questions, send your questions, and we kickstart the discussion. I will start with Angela, perhaps. As African Union representative, so to say, we have seen over the past year some sort of a decline in as far as striving to achieve the Millennium Development Goals, the Agenda 2030. But of course, the pandemic was just like a steering, so it was more like a steer to what we already have been seeing as a not very promising progress. Let me put a negative and a positive together. Let's start with a very banal question, Angela. Where are we? What's happening, and what's happening, what's not happening in as far as development in the continent is concerned?
Thank you very much, Jane, and good afternoon all. Actually, a lot is happening. And per what you have mentioned earlier, with the various Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 2030 and all, I hope you're all aware that the African Union as well has its own agenda, which is 2063. This is not to say that it stands in isolation of all others, but it works in complementary sessions with these, because this is what we had already mapped out before the Agenda 2030 actually was launched. So in view of this, we have various aspirations under it. And I should say that per what the pandemic has brought to us, we've also learned the essence of partnership. We've actually learned it a great deal, and we've been partnering with each other in various respects, in a sense that at the continental level, we're still working together with our other partners like the EU, we are working with Afro-Arab, we are working with TCAD and all other partners on that level. Then regionally, you realize that we are having more formations of people sharing ideas, sharing experiences, so that we'll be able to impact each other based on the kind of knowledge that we have. Then at the national level as well, the AU has been privileged to actually have the convening power of bringing together a lot of member states in various respects. So for example, last week we were having an M&E on the migration policy framework for Africa, whereby there were various stages of development. And then we were discussing where, when, how, and what the challenges are and what some of the shining examples are. So on the continent, I would say that there's a lot going on, even on startups, micro, small, and medium scale enterprises. There's a whole lot of work going on alongside with the diaspora and then with the African businesses and all that. However, there's not so much noise being made about it, and
there's not so much noise
unfortunate.
being made about it. I like that comment, but I would just like to move very quickly to Robert Odeli and get your opinion there, because the discussion here should not divert so much from what we want to achieve, the role of the diaspora. Angela just said we are not blowing the trumpet. As somebody who is confronted with migration issues almost on a daily basis, what has been your observation there? Are we on the right track?
Good afternoon to everyone, and Madam Moderator, if you let me first thank ADEPT for this great event and this very meaningful initiative. And as you were saying, I've been following ADEPT in the past 5 years and supporting them in this partnership that we built together to try to make ADEPT stronger. And all the time in every meeting, I was speaking about impact and communication and what do we do and what do we bring as a change, and can you tell me more on what do we bring for systemic change on the African continent, right? We were always discussing that. And I'm really happy that today we really have this month launched by ADEPT on really trying to capture and to give visibility to what the diaspora is really doing. Because it's only if we give really visibility to those changes and to what is being done on the continent and what are the results that we will attract more interest and more support from donors, private sector partners to really showcase and let's say build up the efforts that the diaspora has started. So really I'm full of hope for this month to really put more weight to the impact and to the communication around the impact. And I would like to commend ADEPT for that. Now coming to your question, I think you were saying mixing the positive and the negative before, and I like that very much. Actually, migration has always two connotations. In a way, you have the stereotypes and seeing migration as negative, but we are convinced in SDC and as Switzerland that despite the stereotypes, migration has always been at the heart of progress and at movement and moving things forward, right? Migration helps to build connection, to transform community, to empower people. And what we try to work on as achieving the SDGs, right, as you were just mentioning before, is really to try to maximize the positive effect of migration and minimize the negative one. And by that, on the positive effect of migration, we'll come back to that. But the remittances were already mentioned, but it's not only that, it's really beyond the remittances, those transfer of skills, of cultural aspects, of social aspects that the diaspora brings, if the framework conditions are there. And I will leave it there if you allow, and would be pleased to deepen that into what we've done in the past 5 years with that. Thank you.
Sure, indeed. We will certainly discuss that a little more in detail a little later. But I first want to welcome Juliana and say, Juliana, you said you were on the road. I suppose you're now settled, but I just want to come back to you. We've just talked about stereotypes about migration vis-a-vis the very positive role that the diaspora or migrants, so to say, contribute to the development of the continent and even beyond. And your organization works towards ensuring social justice. You know, you're striving towards a society of equality, so to say, where justice applies for everybody. What has been your experiences in as far as, you know, trying to understand the contribution of the diaspora vis-a-vis the perception that they receive in their countries of residence within European Union or within Europe, so to say?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jane, for your question. First of all, I'd like to thank you, ADAPT, for the invitation. Thank you, Alexis, for extending the invitation to INAR. Also, thank you to Karini. It's a pleasure to be here with distinguished guests and panelists. I'm very glad, especially to see my old friend Brice here, someone that I know for a long, long time. Coming back to your question, Jane, I think it's possibly a very difficult task to disassociate any result related to migration to stereotypes, to stigma that are there in the context of the integration of migrants. I think being a migrant, and especially being from African descent, being from a racialized community, it means already that you're going to face other barriers that are different from other migrants or from other backgrounds. So the question here is not only how we are perceived, because people are perceived differently depending on the local context where they live, depending on the historical background of the country, depending on the migrant status that they have, depending if it's the first or the second or third generation. So of course, the life experience of these people are different. What we know that is really particularly challenging is to, first of all, bring efficient policies and responses that can really redress and reshape the narrative around migration and about the positive impact of people of African descent in the European context. I also like to make an effort to disassociate migration from people of African descent. I think these are categories that can overlap, but they are also categories that are distinguished, because there are people of African descent, they are there, and they are not anymore migrants, but are perceived as migrants. And therefore, the narrative around migration and people of African descent needs also to be challenged, because we need to overcome these stereotypes that people in migration, they are there just for a short period of time. They will come and contribute to the society, and according to the immigration plan, they're going to follow, we're going to return home. But these are mostly, we're talking about also Europeans from African descent. We are talking about also generation of Europeans that are there from the Africa diaspora. So I think we really also have to change our mindset to not fall in this trap of associating people of African descent with migrant background. Both are very important. They may overlap, but there are different responses to different communities. I think as well, in terms of barriers and what is missing for a greater impact, is to go back to what Jill just mentioned. We need to go to the root cause of the problem. We need to go back to the systemic forms of oppression. We need to go back to the historical inequalities. And then when we find responses, for example, what do we do with hate speech? How do we do with stereotype? What do we do with stigma? What do we do with racism, discrimination? There is no response at the EU level that tackles structural and systemic and institutional racism. We have only responses that deal on how individuals discriminate or stereotype each other. We do not have a political response that overcomes and comes to the root cause and will address then the systemic, the historical, institutional cause of racism. So I think any partnership that is there should be also bringing this new perspective that it's necessary to compose partnerships, to be there in coalitions and to be there to support each other, but we cannot replace the role of the state to support Europeans of African descent, migrants of African descent, and those who overlap in different categories to feel integrated and protracted in Europe. And we as in now, we want a little bit more. We just don't want social justice, we want racial justice. We don't want racial equality, we want racial equity. We want a result, we need to ensure that people have the same opportunities in the access of the right, but also in the result of this excess of right. We need substantial equality, we need equity. So for me, and for us at European Network Against Racism, any step forward needs to overcome this fragmented approach of policies, and we need to really reconstruct this narrative around migration and racialization, because people can be migrants, they can be of African descent, but they also racialize in a process of exclusion. And I think we need to get to deeper discussions to really go back on how we can really provide recommendations and actions that can be efficient to really remove the systemic barriers, either for the integration of migrants, either for the protection of Black Europeans, either for any kind of a safeguard that should be there for anyone residing and representing the diaspora in the European Union.
Okay, thank you very much, Juliana there. Now, I want to pick it on from there. You've just talked about the importance of avoiding generalized stereotypes, and I want to link it to what Gabriel said earlier on when he talked about, the importance of avoiding one size fits it all when it comes to looking for partnerships. And on that note, I will now want to go and hear from Urli. What lessons have we learned there from the European Union perspective, so to say? I mean, when we look at what I said, as well as what Gabriel also said, when we see how much the diaspora has contributed, Angela has emphasized the diaspora contribution towards the development in the continent there. Gabriel talked about how much the diaspora went out of its way to contribute towards helping their people. I mean, took on social responsibility back home. And then we now bring it to link it with what stereotypes are we looking at? How is the diaspora perceived here? And there are some lessons that we are learning, that we are seeing here from the European Union perspective, Urli.
Thank you very much, Jane. I'll switch to French, actually. Je voudrais tout d'abord remercier l'ADEPT pour l'invitation à cet événement. Nous sommes ravis d'être parmi vous. Au nom de l'ICMPD, je voudrais souligner que nous avons accompagné l'ADEPT dans son développement depuis près de 10 ans maintenant. Et nous sommes ravis de voir que l'ADEPT s'est positionné aussi comme un partenaire majeur sur les questions d'engagement de la diaspora africaine. Faciliter cet engagement de la diaspora est un axe clé de notre travail et nous applaudissons cette première édition du mois de l'impact de la diaspora sur le développement de l'Afrique et souhaitons longue vie à l'initiative. Alors ce thème des partenariats est vraiment d'actualité. Il résonne d'ailleurs avec notre Vienna Migration Conference que nous avons organisée il y a 15 jours, dans laquelle nous nous posions également la question de comment réimaginer ces partenariats sur les questions de migration et de développement. Alors, dans cette ère post-Covid de relance, je pense que nous devons tirer quelques enseignements en matière de partenariat, parce que le Covid a catalysé des partenariats intersectoriels et multi-acteurs. Un grand nombre d'acteurs ont cherché des nouvelles alliances pour atteindre leurs objectifs et faire face aux perturbations de nos sociétés. Dans ce contexte et comme dans d'autres contextes humanitaires, les diasporas ont montré leur valeur ajoutée forte, leur capacité à accéder aux communautés affectées, à développer des solutions sur mesure et innovantes et à mobiliser leurs compétences variées. La tendance par défaut en matière de partenariat est souvent de faire des partenariats avec des organisations qui sont assez similaires, ce qui peut mener malheureusement à des duplications de compétences et de pratiques, au lieu d'innover et de faire émerger des solutions intersectorielles et multi-acteurs. Alors pour maximiser l'impact des diasporas, Je voudrais souligner 5 éléments que nous avons appris grâce à la Facilité mondiale de l'Union européenne pour la diaspora. Tout d'abord, qu'il y a besoin d'une diversification des modes de partenariat pour refléter la diversité des acteurs et des compétences, et qu'on peut aller au-delà des partenariats liés aux questions liées à la migration. Dans l'IODIV, nous facilitons des partenariats opérationnels avec des organisations de la diaspora dans divers secteurs. Je dirais de l'engagement de la diaspora pour favoriser l'expansion entrepreneuriale, à l'engagement de la diaspora dans le domaine de l'éducation. Nous avons également appris qu'il y a besoin d'une grande flexibilité dans les partenariats pour faire face aux réalités changeantes, aux évolutions sécuritaires ou autres. Nous avons besoin d'une réelle réciprocité aussi dans les partenariats et de partenariats qui soient vraiment substantiels pour faire écho aussi à ce qu'a dit M. Fall avant moi. Nous voyons aussi l'importance d'inscrire ces partenariats dans la durée et d'aller au-delà des collaborations ad hoc et sporadiques. Et enfin, nous voulons souligner aussi l'importance de tirer à profit les réseaux et les relations préexistantes pour catalyser les partenariats. Et ici, je voulais souligner à nouveau le rôle clé de l'ADEPT pour permettre ces mises en réseau. Merci, Jane.
Thank you very much, Urli, there. Let's bring in a feminine voice, a masculine voice now, after hearing from the ladies. And I would like to hear from my friend, Awal Muhammad. Are you there? I don't see you on picture. Okay, good, you're there.
I'll get you to give us your understanding or your analysis, how you see all these events, unfolding events from a more of an academic perspective or scientific perspective, given on the diverse kind of work that you've been involved in as a think tank, but also in your involvement advising the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Jen, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I think it's a very important event. And when we talk about diaspora, I think we came a long way. And sometimes we are talking as diaspora just started development. I think maybe we need to take this discussion to another level. And that means we now have what I call a diaspora-led development. The diaspora, they have become a very critical development actors on their own right over the past almost 20 years. And I think maybe we need also to disaggregate diaspora because there are all kinds of diaspora. And I think the most important is that if we disaggregate, then we know how to deal with them because you have developmental diaspora, you have humanitarian diaspora, you have business diaspora, you have skill diaspora. So I think this aggregating diaspora is very important. What's also important, and I agree with with Professor Jibril Fall, is that I think now it's time to think how we should promote what I call more diaspora-led development. More diaspora are already in the development, but we need to take the discussion, as I said earlier, to another level. How we can leverage more diaspora-led development. And to do that, we will need a number of things, hopefully in the coming years. One is, I think, the most important is how to build partnerships between diaspora and what I call subnational actors. How diaspora could work with municipalities, both in the host and home countries, how they can work with NGOs, how they can work with local civil society, how they can work with local authorities. So I think building up strategic partnerships between diaspora is very important. That means building up multi-stakeholder partnerships between diaspora and development. It's also important to, and I think I totally agree with Angela, because I know Angela has been doing a lot of work, reaching out to the diaspora, but also collaborating diaspora who are in the academia, who are in research. We just finished what we call diaspora engagement model for development, because of the engagement should be also from on both sides, the side of the diaspora, but also the side of the government. And we have been working on this also with Angela, with CEDAW, and this new, we call them diaspora engagement model for development. I think it's a new model that we just developed, and it has all kinds of pillars. And I think implementing that model will also help the African governments to make sure that they engage the diaspora in a more effective way. Because of, shall I just give you a concrete reality right now is that what we know today is that the diaspora engagement is still informal. So how we can take that engagement to a formal level, then you need to develop policies, you need to develop programs, you need to create consultation mechanisms between the diaspora and their governments in the home countries. Also, the diaspora engagement is still fragmented. How we could also make sure that that fragmentation, although maybe it has advantage, but also how that fragmentation can be also addressed. And the third is diaspora engagement is still local. How we can take that engagement to a higher level. And I think those are the issues that maybe we need to reflect on. So I will stop here. We will continue the discussion. So I will be happy to hear the intervention from others. And Jane, thank you for your excellent moderation. Yeah.
Thank you, Mohammed. May I ask either Kulu or Mirana to have a look at what is happening on the chat? I suppose there's a couple of questions there, but before I mess them up with my not so good French, can you help me read out one of them before I go to my next question here?
Yes.
Mirana, are you there? Can you help me translate one of those questions on the chat room?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, we do hear you.
Yeah, thank you. So the first question is, why not base partnerships on results, such as the number of activities or action, and also the number of beneficiaries? So this is the first question.
Okay, why not base partnership on the results? Or if I suppose I got it right there. I will get to Brice in a little bit, but let me first take that to Robert to tell us why. No. Let me first go to Early again from the European Union perspective. Why not base partnership, as this person here is suggesting? And for those who haven't seen it, just a quick announcement. Angela has had to step out because there is a state of emergency in Addis Ababa and she has to leave the office, but hopefully she joins us a long way. So yeah, just that you know, she's offline for a moment, but we can continue. Please, Orly. What should guide our partnership selection, so to say? I mean, Gabriel has already indicated a few things here, but you can take it on from that and just respond to that question.
Merci Jen de me rediriger cette question très intéressante. C'est vrai, et aussi pour rebondir, je pense, sur ce qu'a dit Will, qui était très intéressant sur comment arriver justement à construire ces partenariats. Je pense qu'il faut tester et partager les enseignements que l'on tire de ces différentes expériences. À l'IODIF, on est en train de tester différents modèles de partenariat. Les partenariats sont sélectionnés bien sûr sur la qualité des propositions, sur l'innovation, sur la durabilité qu'ils proposent. Les critères, nous en avons discuté précédemment. Je voudrais donner par exemple 2 exemples de partenariats que nous sommes en train de tester et qui montrent la multitude des approches que l'on peut prendre pour essayer de comprendre comment développer cet écosystème. Nous sommes en train de travailler par exemple avec un réseau de la diaspora africaine, Africa 2.0, et également un réseau, le plus grand réseau d'entrepreneurs sociaux, Ashoka, pour créer une communauté de changemakers visant à un partage et un soutien bidirectionnel pour développer développer l'entrepreneuriat et l'investissement en Afrique. Comme autre exemple, nous travaillons également avec le gouvernement de Madagascar sur leur demande pour faire une cartographie des compétences de la diaspora malagasy en Europe. Et pour ceci, nous avons créé un partenariat avec des organisations et des experts de la diaspora basés en Europe. Ceci est pour montrer, je pense, un petit peu la diversité des approches que l'on peut prendre en matière de partenariat et à quel point il faut vraiment travailler dans une logique multi-acteurs et multisectorielle. La mobilisation des compétences de la diaspora est encore sous-exploitée, comme cela dit dans le passé, et nous devons vraiment partager davantage ces connaissances. Je pense qu'il faut faire un travail sur les attitudes et les mentalités, promouvoir des exemples de réussite de partenariat avec la diaspora et des aptitudes de la diaspora. Il y a eu des campagnes comme l'a fait ADEPT plus tôt cette année avec la campagne Diaspora démasquée, Héros de la diaspora démasquée, mais également aussi, je pense, un travail sur les compétences pour accroître, je pense, les capacités des acteurs de cet écosystème de la diaspora, à la fois les acteurs gouvernementaux et non gouvernementaux, pour s'engager. Et là, je soulignerai deux sous-axes en matière de compétences. Je pense que la capacité à s'engager dans des partenariats à distance avec les outils digitaux n'est pas encore très maîtrisée. Et les capacités à évaluer les partenariats qui sont porteurs doivent être aussi mieux comprises. Pour s'engager dans des partenariats, ça prend beaucoup de temps et d'efforts. Donc, il est critique de bien savoir préparer le terrain et de savoir mesurer les bénéfices et les limites d'un partenariat. Merci.
Thank you very much indeed. I will now go to Brice. Sorry for keeping you waiting for long, but I'm now eager to hear from you. You've certainly been working or engaged with different development partners, including the United Nations, your own association there that you had, and different other smaller diaspora organizations. And you have such a wide experience working with diaspora organizations, be them all female led or even others that have men therein. From your experience, what lessons can the European Union take in as far as building partners for a pan-European response is concerned?
Merci Jane. Je suis ravie d'être là encore pour ADEPT parce qu'on était à la base pour ADEPT. Je connais plusieurs personnes là autour de la table. Je suis Binouri Brice, mon nom, une Africaine du Bénin et une Européenne de France. Une personne de la diaspora africaine en France partageant ma vie entre les deux espaces, ici et là-bas. Le ici et là-bas est important pour nous, personnes de diaspora, parce que quand on parle de partenariat, on commence ici à construire quelque chose dans nos territoires de vie désormais et nos là-bas qui on a laissé de l'autre côté et qu'on va voir de temps en temps ou des fois on s'installe un peu plus longtemps pour accompagner les projets. Mais avant de continuer, je parle un peu de moi. Je suis consultante senior avec une expertise en migration et développement. C'est ça qui m'a permis d'avancer. D'aller plus loin et en même temps de mettre en place une association qui est devenue une plateforme d'une cinquantaine d'associations de développement dont les leaders sont des femmes de la diaspora africaine résidant en France, de 21 pays africains et de Haïti. Alors, je préside cette organisation depuis un moment. Et ces femmes que nous accompagnons et leur organisation essaient d'apporter leur savoir-faire, leurs compétences dans leur pays d'origine, mais commencent par travailler sur leur propre citoyenneté en France. Ce que je vais vous dire, c'est que moi, je parlerai plutôt de faits concrets. Qu'est-ce que nous avons fait? Avant de faire quelque chose, je note quand même que nous sommes donc membres cofondatrices aussi de ADEPT, membre cofondatrice du Forum, donc c'est la plateforme qui a environ 1000 associations, et des personnes, avec des personnes des diasporas en France qui interviennent en Afrique subsaharienne, au Maghreb, en Asie du Sud-Est, aux Caraïbes et dans l'océan Indien. et FECODEV, donc Femmes et Contributions au Développement, notre association, siège au conseil d'administration du Forum. Nous sommes dans plusieurs autres réseaux, ça c'est très important parce que avant d'aller dans des partenariats pluriacteurs, rester dans plusieurs réseaux et collectifs non gouvernementaux, tels que ADED par exemple, ou le réseau francophone pour l'égalité hommes et femmes, nous amène, et Coordination Sud, nous amène à sortir de chez nous, de nos territoires de vie, et de plus en plus d'avoir dans nos actions de plaidoyer des alliances, des partenaires d'abord et des alliances pour pouvoir amener petit à petit à faire bouger les lignes sur nos revendications. Ce que je m'en vais vous dire, c'est que au niveau mondial, je vais parler du niveau mondial, continental, national et local. Rapidement, nous avons dans le cadre des forums sociaux, dans le cadre des forums mondiaux sur migration et développement DFMD, je pense que beaucoup de personnes y participent. Nous avons été au premier forum mondial sur migration et développement dans le comité de pilotage en Belgique et successivement, nous avons pu travailler jusqu'au dernier, jusqu'en 2021, où nous avons contribué dans des groupes d'experts sur le sujet « Qualifier les migrants pour l'emploi ». Cette consultation régionale du DFMD avec l'Union africaine ou celle avec l'OCDE et ensuite comme délégué au sommet des Émirats arabes unis sur migration et développement et nous avons travaillé sur ce sujet. Je peux ouvrir une parenthèse sur ce sujet, c'est que nous avons déjà parlé à ce moment de partenariat et c'était difficile de continuer à travailler parce que vous savez la langue, il a été choisi des personnes plutôt qui parlent anglais que français sur les décisions qui ont été prises après. Mais nous avons souhaité, et si vous voulez bien le noter, qu'au niveau d'ADEPT, les travaux qu'on a commencés, surtout sur la qualification des migrants pour l'emploi, qu'on puisse le continuer parce qu'il y a des points qui sont assez importants pour nous. C'est la qualification des migrants où il y a la non-reconnaissance des diplômes. Et ça existe encore. Et cette non-reconnaissance des diplômes empêche aujourd'hui les travailleurs migrants qualifiés ou peu qualifiés de continuer à exister dans la dignité et selon ce qu'ils ont déjà appris. Et pour continuer, FECODEV, depuis mars 2019, d'ailleurs, en partenariat avec le Forum et ADEP, nous avons commencé à participer à la CSW. Donc, c'est à New York et c'était à la 3e session annuelle. Nous avons organisé un side event genre migration et développement, action et partenariat pour une protection sociale efficace. Sur ce point, nous avons pu réunir plusieurs partenaires potentiels, dont les organisations de l'OIM de New York, l'OIT, donc c'est Organisation internationale du travail ou des migrations, l'Organisation des femmes en migration, le réseau, et d'autres organisations des sociétés civiles africaines et européennes. Nous veillons toujours à ce qu'il y ait une pluralité d'acteurs pour échanger, pour avoir des regards croisés, pour savoir si après de ces organisations, nous pouvons faire des choses ensemble. Et nous arrivons toujours à nous retrouver sur le terrain pour pouvoir continuer l'après. Nous avons prévu travailler sur la CSW 64 Beijing plus 25 parce que ça nous permettait d'ouvrir les portes encore pour essayer de travailler sur les rapports nationaux qui pointaient vraiment les points critiques au niveau de Beijing plus 25. Malheureusement, la situation de la pandémie a fait que la CSW 64 a été annulée. Mais en mars 2021, nous avons continué et là, nous avons organisé une table ronde. Là encore, c'était pour les femmes des diasporas agir ensemble pour la relance des ODD en situation de COVID en Afrique. Et nous avons pu réunir, on a mis en lumière l'efficience de l'exercice de leadership des femmes et notamment des femmes des diasporas en situation de COVID Et nous avons mis en perspective une invitation de ces femmes des diasporas pour que les partenaires potentiels viennent pour qu'on ait un faire ensemble. Le faire ensemble dans un cadre partenarial concerté pour des objectifs communs autour de la relance des ODD en Afrique. Et ce faire ensemble, nous avons voulu vraiment sensibiliser les partenaires potentiels. Je finis ma
Madame
phrase.
Brice, I will have to cut you short on that one for now. We will certainly continue the discussion, but I would like to go back to Muhammad Awil and ask you to comment on what mechanisms we could be talking about in as far as shifting support to diaspora from skills to long-term development, because you already talked about this. You talked about disaggregating diaspora, moving diaspora from a low level where they focus on maybe family help and small diaspora-based informal sort of development to take it to a higher level. So I would like to get your contribution on that one. What mechanisms are necessary to shift support to diaspora from skills transfer to long-term development? But I give you a minute to prepare that. And as you prepare that, I will again ask Mirana to read for me one more question, because I see some other questions building up on the chat room. I don't want to cheat people here. So read for me one more question there as Awil prepares his response, please.
Oh.
C'est pour moi la question ou je ne parle plus?
Me.
No, Mirana, I asked Mirana to help me translate one more question that is on the chat room, please. This is a challenge for me to work on my French.
Yes, sorry, my mic was not on. So we have another interesting question, which is like a suggestion. So why don't we draw the mapping of diaspora actions in Africa? And
say it again, please.
So why don't we do a mapping of diaspora activities in Africa and give to those projects in Africa a direct financial and technical support?
Why don't we do a mapping of diaspora organizations in Africa or here? I think this is basically directed to Robert and Urli again, because this is concerning our presence here from the other part of the continent. That's why I will seek Urli's response there. But I would also like to hear Robert's contribution there as, again, somebody who is confronted with diaspora migration related issues on a very frequent basis. But first we start with Urli, then we come to Robert, and thereafter I suppose Awil will be ready with my response to that question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On that, I think it all comes to the fact that we support ADEPT. Because ADEPT is one of the organizations we support, which is this platform that not only focus on organization in Europe, but also focus on organization in Africa and try to make the link with the governments and with the different bodies that are relevant, such as the African Union that was speaking at the outset of this event. And I think that's exactly what we find extremely relevant in ADEPT, is not only to focus on people based in Europe or people based in Africa, it's really to reconcile all the different stakeholders and see how to have more impact. And ADEPT provides capacity building to some organization, be it in Europe or in Africa, but they also provide seed funding and they try to really see what is needed to make a change. And I think that's really what we like in ADEPT. I have to say that in the past, we used to have funding to specific diaspora organization for specific projects. And then we changed our approach with now supporting more platforms that are trying to reconcile the different stakeholders and see what are the strengths of the different ones, to try to build the multi-partnership approach. And that's, we don't do it only with ADEP, but with other platforms. And we are currently supporting this approach and believing that this is the right approach to that. And if you allow me just a point, Jane, with respect to what's the role of the government in Europe, such as Switzerland, in supporting diaspora, right? What can we bring to diaspora organization? And I think that the response here is not only about the financial support, but it's also really this kind of diversification of financial sources, for example. I think it was mentioned before by Aurélie, but also by Jibril, that as a government, we support organizations, but we can also promote their approach so that they benefit from, for example, crowdfunding, or that they benefit from support from the private sector or from foundation, or put them in relation with UN organization or others, try to build this partnership to make the ADO stronger. And then the other thing that we can bring as a government, I think, is also try to link the ADO with either the government in the country of destination or in the country of origin, if needed and if relevant. Obviously, there are a lot of politicized issues around diaspora organization and representativity, but sometimes it's very useful to have a government partner to also try to approach other partner. And I think that's two of the aspects. There are, of course, many other, but that's two or three of the aspects that I would like to see as an added value of why a government but because we are the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, right? Why we engage with diaspora organization and with platforms. Thank you.
Okay. And I will ask Aurélie to add on what Robert has just said, please.
Merci Jane. Et j'apprécie beaucoup cette question sur la cartographie des projets de la diaspora et ensuite sur l'accompagnement opérationnel qui peut être fourni à ces projets. C'est la méthodologie de travail que nous avons suivie en fait dans les UDIF. Nous avons d'abord réalisé une grande cartographie globale en matière d'engagement de la diaspora, et cette cartographie est disponible sur notre carte interactive. Vous pourrez accéder à des fiches pays qui sont tout à fait pratiques pour vous donner des informations sur les pratiques, les initiatives en cours en matière d'engagement de la diaspora. Et nous avons ensuite ouvert des dispositifs d'accompagnement technique à la fois accessibles aux gouvernements des pays partenaires de l'Union européenne et aux organisations de la diaspora basées en Europe. Cet accompagnement technique est accessible sur demande, donc nous ouvrons de manière régulière des appels à propositions, et nous venons d'en terminer un au cours de l'été. Nous sommes en train actuellement de finaliser la sélection des projets lauréats. Et cet accompagnement technique est très important. Nous partagerons avec l'ensemble de la communauté d'engagement de la diaspora nos enseignements pratiques à l'issue de ces accompagnements techniques que nous mettrons en place dans les 2 prochaines années.
OK. Est-ce que je peux rajouter quelque chose?
Yes, please.
OK. Il était important que je dise qu'en France, nous avons dans la plateforme d'association Le Forum un programme qui s'appelle Praosim. Et ce programme finance des projets. Nous apportons un appui technique et méthodologique pour des porteurs de projets des diasporas. Et il est important de dire qu'on tisse autour de ce programme plusieurs partenaires, des relations partenariales assez affichées et dans le pays de résidence et dans le pays d'intervention des porteurs de projets. Et ce programme dure depuis plusieurs années et nous souhaiterons au niveau de l'Union européenne qu'il y ait un Praosim européen. Aujourd'hui, en France, on avait commencé par des micro-projets avec 15 000 € et aujourd'hui, nous sommes à des méso-projets de 100 000 €. Et on souhaiterait vraiment si, en termes de partenariat affiché avec l'Union européenne, qu'on puisse voir arriver au niveau d'ADEPT. Par exemple, ce Praosim européen.
Okay, maybe ADEPT will take it up, but the good thing is that we also have a European Union representative on board, and I am sure that she's taking note of that. Angela, welcome back on board. We now go to Awil Mohammed, and I had asked him to prepare a very intelligent answer, so to say, to the question regarding what mechanisms are necessary to shift support to diaspora from skills transfer to long-term development. And once Will finishes his contribution, Angela, now that you're back, I would also like to hear your response to that in as far as African Union perspective is concerned. Will, please.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. I will be very short. And I'm happy that Angela is back because I've been discussing those issues with Angela before. And I think to start with, we need to have a mindset change, at least from the governments of the home countries. Because if diaspora are contributing more to the development, and they have become what I call part of the new development community circles, then governments need really to think and also to have a new way of thinking of how they want to engage the diaspora, because diaspora are now very important development actors. That's one. So mindset change is very important at the national level. The other aspect is that we need, as I said before, Jane, to disaggregate diaspora. So they have to work diaspora. There are medical groups, there are business groups, there are development community groups, we call them diaspora development practitioners, and diaspora humanitarian groups. So if you disaggregate diaspora, then it will be easy to work with, because of the diaspora engagement is also cross-cutting. So some work with Minister of Health, some work with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, some work with the Minister of Finance. So taking diaspora engagement to a higher level will be much easier to work those who are organized along professional lines, where they are in the academia, where they are in the private sector, where they are in the health sector. It's also important to make sure that governments should try to mainstream diaspora engagement in international development plans. It has to be part of the national development plan, in whether it's 3 or 4 years, and that would also require formalized engagement. It should not be ad hoc, it should not be like a one-off, and it should not be informal. So all those processes really need to be looked at, and I'm very glad that Angela is still with us. I have been discussing with them, because of Angela is also trying to really to take the engagement to a higher level, to the African Union level, to the regional level, but also to the national level. And that's really is very critical, but also we need to have more discussions, because after 20 years, diaspora engagement has become bigger, has become wider, and it's already integrated into different levels. But still, what we are not really understand is that we still treat diaspora as they are not critical development actors. They are more or less like an Oxfam. So why we are not treating our diaspora organizations like a small Oxfam contributing to the development? So I think still we need higher thinking, because of diaspora. For diaspora, we don't want to talk individuals. Diaspora are already well organized. So maybe it's time really to work with those organized diaspora along professional, practical, and business lines.
Okay, the call here is we need to treat diaspora differently, just like Gabriel mentioned in his statement that I think we should look at the diaspora beyond being senders of remittances or contributors of social change within families to more developmental actors. Now, Angela, what mechanisms are necessary to shift support to diaspora from skills transfer to long-term development? This is not a question that you're facing for the first time, but I think we still need your elaborate response to this from the African Union perspective. I'm afraid we are running out of time, so I will ask you to be a little brief, even when I'm demanding for an elaborate answer.
Thank you very much, Jane. Actually, first and foremost, we've been, so far as CEDAW is concerned, we've been working with diasporas during our regional consultative meetings and encouraging them to crystallize or form networks, because in these networks, it's easier for them to have clout, for their voices to be heard, and then for them to have bigger impacts. So based on this, we've been doing a lot of, we've been encouraging them a lot on some of these issues. And on the other side, we've been actually dealing with member states in the sense that as one of the key components, we've been doing member state capacity building, with which I worked with Awil on one, which was to do with the diaspora engagement self-assessment tool, so that based on various pillars of political will, diaspora-friendly environment, outreach mechanisms, so on and so forth, these member states can self-evaluate themselves, and then we figure out where these gaps are. Then we couch tailor-made trainings for them, for their diaspora focal persons, for them to be able to engage. Another thing we have done at the commission level is that Togo is currently championing a 10-year decade to celebrate diaspora, have a lot of activities and engagement with diaspora. We've been talking to them that it's about time that we have a ministerial at least, because 2012's Heads of States Summit has been a long time, and it's about time that we have a ministerial to bridge that gap between what heads of state say and then those at the operational level, so that we'll be able to have that kind of engagement for them to have a deeper understanding on the dynamics of diaspora engagement for them to be able to forge ahead. So succinctly, this is what we've been doing so far as the SEAG from the diasporas as developmental actors, and how best to actually expatiate on what they are doing for them to be able to be streamlined into various national development plans are concerned. Thank you.
Something is certainly happening behind the doors. Thank you very much, Angela. Now, I'm going to give the audience one more question since we don't have much time. So I'll ask Mirana to pick out one question. And as you do that, pick out and translate for me one more question. As you do that, I want to go back to something that Brice already mentioned or talked about, the issue of qualification. I mean, recognizing academic papers of migrants in the different countries within Europe. And I would like to pose a question to Juliana. Your organization is certainly striving, working towards social justice, like I already indicated. What do you think should be done, or what should be the approach followed by the different countries of residence within Europe in as far as your work is concerned? What should be the approach in as far as recognizing academic qualifications that the different migrants bring to this part of the continent, considering that we have already talked about how much they contribute to their countries of residence as well as their countries of origin? Juliana, please.
I don't know if Brice wants to answer first. Brice, tu veux répondre d'abord?
Maybe you go in first,
yeah.
Because I would like to hear from your side as an advocacy organization, if this is also one of the things that you're addressing, because I mean, Brice already mentioned this as something that they observe, and I would like to hear from you.
Yeah, from our perspective, it's really important, first of all, to have an intersectional approach. And when I talk about intersectional approach, I'm not talking about only the plurality of identities that someone can have, like being a migrant, being from African descent, being a woman, but I'm also talking about how we're going to remove these structural institutional barriers that are there in terms of historical inequalities. And I think one component of being intersectional is also bringing policy alignment and policy consistency. So if you have a plan for development, this should also be aligned with a plan for integration for migrants, and this should also be aligned with a plan against racism. And that's let's say that's the biggest success of the different system of oppression, is that they fragmented this policy to be sure that we cannot have an equal access and equal opportunities throughout to all these policy agenda that are there for different communities that are considered vulnerable. I think it's important that we do not, I hear a lot about recognition of skills, I hear about opportunities, I hear about projects. If you bring more alignment in policies, you're going to see there are other opportunities there that are beyond a development plan from the EU with Africa, that is beyond a migration plan, that is beyond an integration plan. Just to highlight a few examples, there is the whole package on integration for talent partnerships that is part of the integration plan of the EU, and this is not being explored very much with the African diaspora. There is also an integration, the anti-racism plan for diversity, for the EU Action Plan Against Racism. There is also a whole package for employment and exchanges for talents outside the EU, and also how to have more diversity and inclusion for people of African descent. When you talk about other plans, for example, such as gender and LGBTI, there is also the question how we can be more transversal to protect the different people from different backgrounds living in Europe. So I think we need to explore, open other doors, understanding that there is a fragmented approach, but there is not only one solution. There are many solutions. People talked about research and documentation. There is the whole H2020 there with 38 funding opportunities for the diaspora in Africa to apply this funding partnership with EU organizations. So it's important to have data. I really like to reinforce that there is a real problem with the collection of data in the European Union. We cannot disaggregate data by race, migrant status, and other categories of discrimination. So I think if we have these opportunities to invest in partnerships and research, especially with the EU funding, would be benefit. I'm sorry, kids and cats, they are part of all conferences and seminars that I attend. So the other thing as well that is important is that there are also organizations that are, or platforms that are lacking the representation of these African diasporas because we are working in silos. There is the EU platform for civil society organizations with the EU coordination against racism. There is probably only 2 or 3 organizations from the African diaspora. Where are the others? When you go to the integration platform of migrants, there is no one from the African diaspora. Where are the organizations representing the diaspora? And I think it's as well we have to challenge this tokenism approach that was said before. Big organizations are representing everybody, and this is also a concern that I have as my organization. We also have to have a decolonial approach. Big organizations as mine cannot represent everybody, and we cannot take all the opportunities that are there, cannot benefit all the fundings and have all the structures. We have to have a way to create partnership, decolonizing the system, the schemes, to make sure that small organizations, community-led organizations based here or based in Africa can have financial investment or return from this project. Otherwise, they are just beneficiary of the actions, but never beneficiary of the financial resources. So I think partnership also means self-education. We need to educate ourselves. We need to reconstruct some narratives and change our mindset. So I think it's important that we try to explore other niches. And I'm sorry I spoke too much, Jane, but thank you for this opportunity.
Anyway, thank you. Those are very insightful words. To challenge tokenism is something that Gabriel also talked about. I'm really sorry that we have just 2 minutes to close the workshop, but I already promised that we will read one more question from the chat form. Mirana, are you ready with the question before we close down?
Yes, Jane. So the next question that we have is, the question is addressed to Angela. And the question is, which African Union activities promote the partnership with diaspora?
Angela, very briefly, please, which African Union activities promote partnership with the diaspora?
There are several, but among which is
Angela, you just switched off your microphone very successfully.
Sorry. Sorry, quickly, there are several of them, but the most recent is the Diaspora Innovation Days, which happened in Abuja, whereby you saw the collaboration between the AU, ADEPT, and then the African Diaspora Youth Forum in Europe. And then we even brought on board Afrexim Bank. So we have various activities that we do that support the diaspora. We as well gave the kind of leverage for them to be able to take part in the on the diaspora panel in the Intra-African Trade Fair, which is happening in Durban next week. And then diasporas are also being involved in the expo, for example, on the other African Union Pavilion. So at the CEDAW level, these are some of the things that the AU is actually engaging diasporas on. Beyond the fact that we team up with various diaspora networks to discuss with other departments. For example, we have another meeting of health ministers on Zoom with the Africa CDC and then the Diaspora Africa Forum. So there are a lot of things going on, and these are some of the things that I can mention.
Thank you very much, Angela. And to wind up, just one sentence to respond to this question from all my participants. At the end of it, like I already indicated, and you are certainly aware that this is a whole month of series that ADEPT is undertaking to talk about the impact of diaspora involvement in the development of the continent, as well as looking at post-COVID-19 recovery. My final question to all of you is, at the end of it all, what conducive ecosystem must we create in both host countries and countries of origin? Just one brief response to that, Peter. I will start with Juliana, because you're right on the top right-hand side of my screen.
I think the COVID exacerbated the historical inequalities, and I think one of the biggest challenge is data, collect data to prove that there is a case of inequality, and we need to advocate for more ways to disaggregate data based on race, migrant status, and other grounds of discrimination.
Awareness creation, data collection. Thank you very much, Juliana. There, Brice, your take on that one. What, at the end of all these 1 month of activities and beyond, what conducive ecosystem must we create in both host countries and countries of origin? One sentence, please, Brice. Brice, that was to you.
Tout simplement, mettre une passerelle entre le ici et là-bas pour que les personnes des diasporas renforcées, appuyées, puissent non seulement se déplacer en mobilité de compétences et en transfert de compétences, mais être auprès des autorités locales, parce que c'est là la proximité avec les populations.
Thank you very much. That we need to talk about that one. Next is Robert, please.
For me, it's really that we remember and we get to know what we do and for what we do it. And it's really this question of impact and communication of the impact. Remember what we want to achieve, right? We want to achieve change for the people on the African continent through diaspora contribution. And this is the basis. We need to work on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Early, please.
Il faut vraiment, pour renforcer les messages précédents, mettre en place un meilleur cadre de connaissances sur les compétences et la valeur ajoutée de la diaspora, et un meilleur cadre aussi de communication autour de ces atouts uniques qu'ont la diaspora, qui sont encore mal connus.
And finally, but not least, Mohammed.
Yes, since I'm the last, for me, it's what I call enabling environment on both sides, which could facilitate what I call more diaspora-led development.
Thank you very much to all my participants, to all the presenters. You've been such an eloquent team, and I'm sure that the participants have all taken something very important, not something small. A lot of information has come out of your contributions there. Thank you indeed. Thank you very much. Just a quick wrap up from what I was able to take home. I again want to thank the ADEPT president, Alexis Neuberg. I suppose you're there. Thank you very much for your opening remarks. You certainly set the tone and you lit the light for us when you talked about the need for solid partnerships, for solid partnerships for the diaspora. And of course, you say that the challenge needs to be addressed in order to enhance the benefits that come with the diaspora and their contribution in the different parts of the continent. You talked about working on political engagement that is favorable to the cooperation between the diaspora and the different countries of origin, as well as their countries of residence at the moment. Of course, you talked about regional cooperation there, and you started by emphasizing the very important but not so well documented or recognized role that the diaspora contribute towards the development of the continent. Thank you very much, Alexis, for those contributions. We also heard from Gabriel, of course, who was one of the brain behind the formation of ADEPT there. I liked his emphasis on the fact that partnership is not something that we should be debating about, but it's already something that is provided for in international instruments. And I think that he gave us some insights there and some starting points if we already are not already into that. He talked about the diaspora not having to look at the diaspora as a group or a category of people that only increase remittances towards the continent, but as a people that play a very active role in the development of the continent. And this, of course, is also reckoned in the African Union's recognition of the diaspora as the sixth region of the continent. Of course, Gabriel also talked about the need to improve mechanisms of partnership, and he noted some different, approaches there that need to be found. Of course, emphasizing the issue of appropriate financing. And what I liked most, what I take home from his talk was the idea of avoiding or challenging tokenism, where diaspora organizations are just involved for the sake of, if for lack of a better word, just to present and showcase that, yes, they are also present. Of course, you will agree with me that the Vice President gave us quite very inspiring remarks there, full, and the message was very pregnant with a lot of very important aspects, very important subjects that she talked about there. She talked about the need to continue building the reach between people of African descent. This is for me really a global call to build the reach between or among people of African descent, wherever they are in the different parts of the globe. She also, of course, again talked about the failure to recognize the important role that the diaspora contributes to the continent. Of course, being an activist, a human rights activist there, she underscored again the impact of what people of African descent go through. The issue of equality, gender issues were full and very pregnant in her message there. Recognition of justice and development, the need to eradicate social injustices, and so on and so forth. She talked about the continued suffering that people of African descent continue to go through, the systematic violence, and pregnant with lots of examples there. But my take home was really that at the end of the day, when we talk about all this, the battle must continue. And I think that that's a message that as we wind today's conference, we should all be taking home, either individually or as diaspora organizations. The battle needs to be continued. And of course, we heard from African Union there. That was for me an encouraging message that, yeah, the diaspora, we are not just doing things, but the diaspora is, of course, recognized African Union leading its member states do recognize the important contribution of the diaspora. And I think it is an encouragement and a call for diaspora organizations to continue what they've already started. And of course, with ADEPT on board, I think we are on the right track. With that, I again want to take this opportunity to thank you all the participants for turning up in big numbers. Thank you all to the presenters and the discussants. I hand back now to Alexis, the Vice President, for his final closing remarks. Alexis, please.
Thank you very much, Jane. And I think all of you will join to me and to give an applause for a very prompt moderation for these 2 hours. And I'm also here very, very proud that the start of Impact Month is for us here in ADEPT, an honor that you are here attending and also helping us to start as we was thinking. Maintenant, c'est à la fin de notre première séance. La première séance qui nous aura permis aussi élargir les horizons de cet objectif. Effectivement, pour rappeler qu'au niveau d'ADEPT, nous avions envisagé que ce mois d'impact devrait servir d'abord à un espace de dialogue pour les institutions, organisations, initiatives qui travaillent dans le même secteur pour que puissent identifier ceux qui font la même chose ou bien puissent être identifiés ceux qui peuvent travailler ensemble pour unir les forces. En même temps, ça va être une occasion pour la visibilité. Je pense que nous aurons le temps aussi de contacter les médias pour que la visibilité de notre action soit au-delà de nos activités. Vous comprendrez aussi que j'ai aussi noté quelques-unes des recommandations des gens qui ont parlé. Je profite de cette occasion pour remercier encore une fois la présence de l'Union africaine parce qu'effectivement, nous avons beaucoup à faire sur le terrain. Et le terrain est en Afrique. Et parmi les questions qui ont été posées, il y avait des gens qui disaient pourquoi on ne peut pas soutenir des partenariats sur le terrain, etc. Et pour un petit rappel, le nouveau conseil d'administration qui est en place depuis le 23 janvier cette année a un objectif de transformer un ADEPT, une organisation, une plateforme rayonnante à travers ses membres sur le terrain. Donc, vous comprenez en même temps que nous devons mettre en place des mécanismes pour ça, et même une étude est en train d'être menée pour documenter le rôle de la diaspora africaine dans le développement local. Cette étude est en passe d'être terminée et devra être présentée au début de l'année prochaine, je pense au mois de janvier. Mais entre-temps, nous avons aussi la possibilité aujourd'hui de réunir beaucoup d'acteurs. Parmi les acteurs, il y en a ceux qui sont nos partenaires, comme la coopération sud de développement, comme ASMPD, qui sont nos acteurs traditionnels. Et effectivement, cette occasion servira aussi à avoir d'autres partenaires en jeu. C'est pour cela que nous ouvrons des horizons. Mais pour d'autres organisations comme ENA, comme Concorde, d'autres organisations, d'autres partenaires, pour qu'ensemble nous voyons comment dans l'avenir on peut ne pas, comme Odile Aurélie a dit, ne pas dupliquer, mais chercher complémentarité. Donc, inutile de créer les roues quand les roues ont été inventées depuis. C'est bien d'utiliser les autoroutes qui ont été mises en place afin de ne pas reprendre la même chose. Alors, pour ça, je dis encore merci à vous tous, toutes qui êtes ici présents. Mais entre-temps, pour vous annoncer que le mois qui commence a un grand agenda. Donc, nous commençons aujourd'hui, mais nous avons beaucoup de, comme je l'ai dit, dans les pays, il y a des activités qui sont organisées. Mais entre-temps, il y en a ceux qui sont déjà connus, comme le 13 novembre, il y aura notre association membre, le Socle, va organiser l'impact de la Journée internationale des personnes handicapées. Le handicap en Afrique au XXe siècle, C'est un sujet que nous, au niveau d'ADEPT même, nous avons pris au sérieux parce qu'il n'est pas souvent discuté. Et les associations de nos associations membres dans ce domaine vont nous aider à aussi réaliser cet impact dans ce domaine-là. Le 20 novembre, il y a une formation sur comment rapporter l'impact des activités, au phase de partenariat, opinion ou nécessité. Alors, on va discuter comment le développement des partenariats a permis au réseau des organisations des femmes africaines de la diaspora promouvoir. Nous avons notre rendez-vous traditionnel, le DDT, Dialogue Développement Plateforme, qui aura lieu à sa 13e édition et ce sera entre le 24 et le 25. Ce sera en ligne. Alors, le thème sera utiliser les pouvoirs de partenariat pour le développement. Alors, la jeunesse vient encore pour clôturer notre mois, le 26. Il y aura Youth Talk. Le thème sera à récompenser l'innovation dans l'entrepreneuriat. Nous aurons l'occasion de nous revoir à la fin de ce Youth Talk pour clôturer ensemble, pour nous évaluer, pour voir si nous avons atteint ce que nous devons atteindre, sachant justement qu'on ne peut pas atteindre tout ce qu'on veut atteindre. Mais nous allons tenir compte de ce que vous avez dit et ce qui sera dit dans une publication qui sera documentée et mise à la disposition de tous les acteurs qui en auront déjà besoin, mais nous tiendrons à continuer à l'exploiter. C'est pour cela que même dans nos services, nous avons des services de suivi et soit des DDD, mais soit aussi des activités comme celle-ci. Alors, je vous souhaite une bonne soirée et les rendez-vous sont déjà pris. Nous allons vous recontacter encore, surtout dans les différents contacts où nous avons besoin encore de vos voix. Et c'est pour moi la meilleure occasion aussi de revoir des amis comme Jibril, comme Awil, comme Brice. C'est une occasion aussi de saluer justement Juliana, que je connaissais depuis longtemps en ENA. Et effectivement, en terminant sur Aurélie et Robert, Odile, avec qui nous faisons le chemin toujours régulièrement. Donc, merci encore une fois. Et comme je le dis, ceci n'aurait pas été possible si l'équipe d'ADEPT n'avait pas travaillé d'arrache-pied. Nous avions un agenda très sérieux et très concentré, mais tout de même, cette équipe qui met tout en œuvre pour que ce soit un mois exemplaire, mais une bonne base parce que c'est la première édition. Donc, au niveau du conseil, au nom du conseil d'administration, je voudrais transmettre mes salutations et mes félicitations. Donc, bonne soirée à tout le monde. On se retrouvera dans les numéros qui vont suivre. Ainsi, la séance est levée. Il n'y a pas de réception parce que c'est en ligne. Donc, chacun peut prendre un verre en mémoire d'ADEPT. Mais ma voix est malade parce que je suis en train d'attraper la grippe. Bonsoir.
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 Thank you very much.
Bonsoir, Jibril.
Bye-bye, everyone.